In the 3rd century, a Persian prophet named Mani described 4 great kingdoms that dominated the known world. He listed Rome, Persia, and the distant empire of China. The 4th kingdom he named was different. It was not in Europe. It was not in Asia. It stood in Africa. This was the Kingdom of Aksum, a Christian superpower long before most of Europe had even encountered the gospel. Axum minted gold coins stamped with the cross of Christ. Its merchants sailed to India. Its navy dominated the Red Sea. Its engineers raised enormous stone monuments whose construction still puzzles modern experts. Axum shaped ancient history as deeply as Rome or Byzantium, yet most people have never heard of it. This is not simply forgotten history. This is history that has been systematically erased. Today we are bringing it back into the light. The story of Axum, Africa's first great Christian empire. To understand Axum, you must first understand its land. Picture the Horn of Africa in ancient times. No modern borders, no colonial lines drawn in the 19th century, only the raw geography. Towering volcanic islands climb more than 2,000 meters. Mist-covered peaks give way to fertile plateaus nourished by seasonal monsoon rains. Deep river gorges slice through ancient rock. Thick forests of juniper and wild olive trees cover the slopes. Then the land descends sharply toward the coast, turning into hot, shimmering arid plains where the Red Sea gleams like liquid metal under the sun. Axum rose in what is today northern Ethiopia and Eritrea, centered in the highlands of Tigray. But geography is never only about place, it is about connection. Axum sat at one of the most strategic crossroads in the ancient world. To the west stretched the African interior, rich in gold, ivory, rhinoceros horn, tortoise shell, and captives traded across continents. The highlands themselves yielded frankincense and myrrh, the same sacred resins burned in Roman temples and later used in Christian liturgy. To the east, a short journey down through the hills led to the Red Sea, the ancient highway linking Africa, Arabia, Persia, India, and eventually the Silk Road. Whoever held the western shore of the Red Sea controlled the gateway between 3 continents. Axum held that shore. Its greatest port, Adulis, has vanished, but its ruins still speak of lost splendor. Adulis was far more than a harbor. It was a bustling international hub where Greek, Arab, Indian, and African voices mixed daily. Greek merchants bargained with Arab traders. Indian ships unloaded pepper, cotton, and spices. African caravans arrived laden with ivory tusks and gold dust. Axumite officials taxed every deal, pouring wealth into the royal treasury to pay for armies, palaces, and eventually grand churches. A 1st-century Greek merchant guide, called the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, describes Adulis with clear admiration. Ships arrived from Egypt and Arabia. Axum imported wine, olive oil, and iron tools. In return, it exported huge quantities of ivory, so much that Roman craftsmen across the empire depended on it. The Periplus also portrays the Axumite king as educated, fluent in Greek, skilled in diplomacy, and strong enough to open or close access to the African interior. This was no remote tribal chief. This was a sophisticated ruler who knew exactly how valuable his position was and used it without mercy. The landscape itself shaped the Axumites. The highlands offered natural defense against invaders. Reliable rains supported intensive agriculture and a large population capable of building cities and raising armies. Proximity to the sea made long-distance trade unavoidable. The meeting point of African, Arabian, and Mediterranean cultures created a society that was unusually open, adaptable, and ready to seize global opportunities. Geography sets the stage, but empires are built by people who organize, innovate, and dream big. Axum possessed all 3 qualities. Its origin story blends archaeology, oral tradition, and scattered written records. We lack an exact founding date or detailed early king lists. What survives are coins, stone inscriptions, ruined cities, and accounts from outsiders who visited during Axum's peak and struggled to describe its power. The Axumites, claimed descent from the older kingdom of Demat, which had flourished in the same region centuries earlier. They also linked themselves to the biblical kingdom of Sheba and, through Sheba, to King Solomon of Israel, a claim that later became central to Ethiopian royal identity. Whether these links are literal history or powerful myth hardly matters. What matters is that Aksum saw itself as heir to an ancient, sacred lineage. By the 1st century CE, Aksum was already a serious regional force. Its real explosion came in the 3rd and 4th centuries, driven by tight control over trade routes, ports, farmland, skilled metalworkers, and stone carvers. Minting coinage was one of the clearest signs of ambition. In the ancient world, issuing your own money signaled sovereignty, economic stability, and international trust. Rome minted coins. Persia minted coins. The Kushans in Central Asia minted coins. So did Axum. Aksumite coins have turned up as far away as India and Sri Lanka, showing how far Aksumite merchants traveled and how widely their gold was accepted. These are not cheap copies of Roman designs. They were finely crafted, stamped with royal portraits, Greek and later Ge'ez, inscriptions, and symbols of power. Early coins show kings wearing elaborate crowns decorated with wheat sheaves or ribbons. Later ones proudly display the Christian cross, a symbol that would redefine the entire kingdom. Aksum's rise was economic and military at the same time. Its kings commanded armies that crossed the Red Sea into Arabia, pushed north along the Nile against the fading kingdom of Kush, and campaigned deep into Africa's interior. Royal inscriptions proudly list conquered peoples, defeated rulers, and rivers of tribute flowing to the capital. One early king, Ge'ez, boasted of crushing multiple enemies and punishing rebels with the harshness typical of ancient propaganda. Yet Aksum did not rely only on terror. Defeated groups were frequently integrated into the system. Local leaders kept some authority in return for loyalty and payments. This was not mercy, it was smart politics. Aksum ruled a mosaic of ethnic groups, languages, and beliefs. Only a blend of force and flexibility could hold such diversity together. By the early 4th century, Aksum ranked among the richest kingdoms on earth. Its kings lived in palaces rivaling those of the Mediterranean. Its merchants linked 3 continents. Its builders created wonders that still challenge explanation. But raw wealth and military might do not guarantee lasting fame. What truly anchored Aksum in history was one king's revolutionary choice. He made his empire officially Christian. Around 330 CE, the exact year is debated, King Ezana declared Aksum a Christian state. This was not private faith. It was official policy, public identity, and state religion. The old gods of sky, earth, and ancient South Arabian tradition were replaced. The cross became the emblem of royal power. Churches rose across the highlands. Aksum joined the small group of early Christian empires. Consider the timing. Constantine had only recently begun to favor Christianity in Rome. The Council of Nicaea was still fresh. Most of Europe remained pagan or only partially converted. Yet Aksum had already committed itself fully to Christ. This was a major realignment in the religious map of the late antique world. Ethiopian tradition tells how it happened. 2 Syrian brothers, Frumentius and Adesius, traveled on a merchant ship along the Red Sea. The vessel stopped at the Axumite coast for water and supplies. Locals attacked, killing everyone except the 2 boys, who were spared and taken to the royal court. The king, either Ezana's father or predecessor, recognized their education and raised them at court. Frumentius, the older brother, became especially trusted. When the king died and young Ezana took the throne, Frumentius acted as regent or senior advisor. Being Christian himself, he eventually brought the king to the faith. Whether the conversion came through sincere persuasion, theological debate, or political calculation, we cannot know for certain. What is certain is that Ezana converted, and when the king converted, the kingdom followed. Ancient conversion rarely meant instant mass belief. It meant the state adopted Christianity as its official religion. Royal coins, inscriptions, public rituals, and architecture all shifted. Ezana's coinage tells the story clearly. Early issues show the crescent and disc symbols of the old pantheon. Later issues replace them with a cross. Inscriptions do the same. Early ones call on traditional deities. Later ones begin in the faith of God, by the power of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Why did Christianity take root so strongly? Historians offer two main explanations. Some stress genuine personal belief. Frumentius may have sincerely convinced Ezana. Others emphasize strategy. Christianity was spreading fast through the Roman world. Adopting it aligned Axum with the emerging Christian Roman Empire under Constantine and his heirs. It opened doors to trade, diplomacy, and shared religious identity with the West's dominant power. Likely, both motives operated together. Kings are capable of real faith and cold ambition simultaneously. Whatever the balance, the consequences were enormous. Christianity gave Aksum new legitimacy. It tied the kingdom to a worldwide Christian network stretching from Ethiopia to Egypt, Syria, and Rome. It linked Aksumite rulers to biblical history, Solomon, Sheba, David, the prophets, turning royal ideology from mere conquest into divine mission. Christianity also produced magnificent churches. The Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in Aksum is, according to tradition, the resting place of the Ark of the Covenant. Whether or not the Ark is truly there, ancient churches across the highlands are real archaeological fact. These were not humble buildings. They used massive stone blocks, intricate carvings, and designs meant to inspire awe and proclaim both God's glory and the king's power. The faith reshaped culture in quieter ways too. The Bible was translated into Ge'ez, Aksum's language, creating a rich literary tradition and an educated clergy that preserved knowledge for centuries. Monasteries appeared in remote highlands, becoming centers of learning and devotion that outlasted the empire itself. Christianity also pulled Aksum into the wider Christian world's conflicts. As debates over Christ's nature divided the church, Aksum had to choose sides, choices that later shaped its ties with Byzantium, Egypt, and the rising Islamic world. For the moment, though, in the mid-4th century, Christianity strengthened Aksum. It unified the kingdom, connected it to powerful friends, and gave it a sense of sacred destiny. King Ezana used that new identity in war. He campaigned against the last remnants of Kush along the Nile. Victories he described as God-given. He expanded into southern Arabia, placing client rulers on thrones and collecting tribute. The cross flew over his armies. Aksum was no longer merely a trading power. It had become a Christian empire, and that changed everything. Some places refused to let the past stay buried. In the highlands of Aksum, huge carved stones still stand or lie broken, speaking louder than any text. These are the Aksum stelae, among the most astonishing monuments of the ancient world. The tallest, called the Great Stele, reached over 33 meters and weighed more than 500 tons. A single block of granite, quarried, shaped, transported miles across rugged terrain, and erected without modern machines. Modern engineers still debate exactly how it was done. The process must have been monumental. Workers used bronze and iron tools to chip away at solid rock for months or years until a gigantic slab was freed. Then it was dragged, likely on wooden sledges or rollers, by hundreds of men or oxen over miles of highland paths. Finally, it was raised, tilted upright into a deep foundation trench, and stabilized perfectly. One mistake and the stone would shatter. Yet the Axumites succeeded dozens of times. The stele field contains over 100 carved monoliths, from small markers to colossal towers. These were not rough pillars. They were sculpted to imitate multi-story buildings, complete with false doors, false windows, carved beams, and precise architectural details that copy wooden construction techniques in stone. They symbolized eternal royal palaces, power made permanent. Most stelae marked royal or noble tombs. Beneath them lie underground chambers filled with grave goods, pottery, glass vessels, ivory objects, gold jewelry. These were royal mausoleums designed to honor the dead and impress the living. After Christianity arrived, the tradition continued but changed. Some stelae received carved crosses. Inscriptions began invoking Christian themes. The old practice of raising giant stones was adapted to glorify the new faith and the kings who served it. The stelae prove Aksum had massive surplus labor, surplus food, surplus political stability. Only a highly organized society could feed and coordinate thousands of workers for years on a single project. Only a confident kingdom would invest so heavily in monuments meant to last forever. Aksum was also a city of palaces. Ruins across the modern town show foundations of huge multi-room buildings with courtyards, drainage channels, staircases, and stone columns. These were sophisticated residences where kings received ambassadors, administered the empire, and displayed wealth. The so-called Palace of Dungar stands out. Its layout shows clear Arabian and possibly Indian influences, with wings arranged around a central court, carved decorations, and both living and ceremonial spaces. Visitors from distant lands would have been awed into respect. Churches formed another layer of grandeur. Besides the famous Church of Mary of Zion, Axum built many others, some from enormous stone blocks, some later hewn directly from living rock. Their decorations blended Christian symbols with distinctly African artistic styles. Although the famous rock-hewn churches of Lalibela and Tigray belong to later centuries, they continue the Aksumite tradition of monumental Christian architecture carved from the landscape itself. All of this shows Aksum was not only rich and strong, it was culturally advanced. Its builders mastered engineering principles forgotten in Europe for centuries. Its artisans excelled in stone, metal, and ivory work on a level equal to the best of the Mediterranean. Its kings commissioned art and architecture intended for eternity, and much of it has endured. An empire also needs the ability to project force. Aksum excelled at war. Its armies were not defensive garrisons. They were expeditionary forces that struck across deserts, mountains, and seas. They raided, conquered, and enforced tribute over a huge and varied region. Southern Arabia, modern Yemen, was a constant focus. The area produced frankincense and myrrh, controlled valuable routes, and housed rich kingdoms like Saba and Himyar. Relations swung between alliance, trade, and war. In the early 4th century, Izana launched major invasions across the Red Sea. Inscriptions describe cities burned, enemies slain, and tribute collected. This was systematic conquest. Aksum held sway over parts of southern Arabia, on and off, for more than 2 centuries, installing puppet rulers and treating the region as an overseas province. Moving armies across open water required ships, logistics, and sophisticated organization. Aksum clearly possessed both a navy and the administrative skill to support long campaigns far from home. To the north lay the decaying Kingdom of Kush. Once mighty enough to conquer Egypt, Kush had weakened over centuries. Izana saw the chance. Aksumite forces marched up the Nile, destroyed towns, captured herds, and subdued the Kushite king. The psychological blow was enormous. Kush had once humbled Rome. Now it bowed to Aksum. The Upper Nile passed under Aksumite dominance, cementing northeastern Africa's leading power. Byzantine writers of the 5th and 6th centuries mention Aksum with respect tinged with caution. When Byzantium needed leverage against Persia, it sometimes called on Aksum as an ally. When Christians in Arabia faced persecution, Constantinople looked to Aksum for help. The most dramatic example came in the early 6th century under King Caleb. A Jewish ruler named Yusuf in Himyar began persecuting Christians. Byzantine Emperor Justin asked Caleb to intervene. Caleb launched a large-scale invasion. Aksumite troops crossed the Red Sea, defeated Yusuf, killed him, installed a client king, and restored Christian rule. This action showed Aksum acting as the armed protector of Christianity in the Red Sea zone. It deepened Aksum's reputation as defender of the faith and tied it even more tightly to Mediterranean religious politics. Military success required constant funding. Armies, ships, and campaigns consumed enormous resources. Those resources came mainly from trade, especially through the port of Adulis. Ivory, gold dust, frankincense, myrrh, slaves, tortoise shell, rhinoceros horn, and live exotic animals flowed out. In return came Mediterranean wine, olive oil, iron tools, glassware, and luxury items. Traders from Egypt, Greece, Arabia, Persia, and India met in Adulis. Taxes on every transaction filled the royal coffers and paid for war and building. Trade also meant diplomacy. Aksumite kings sent embassies to Rome, Byzantium, and Persia. They exchanged gifts, received foreign envoys, and negotiated treaties. This was the behavior of a great power, not a marginal state. Foreign observers confirm Aksum's importance. The 1st century Periplus calls the Aksumite king educated, Greek-speaking, and personally involved in trade and foreign relations. Hardly the portrait of a primitive ruler. Roman sources mention Axum as a valued trading partner. Byzantine historians like Procopius describe Aksumite campaigns in Arabia and portray King Caleb as a vital partner in containing Persian influence. The Persian prophet Mani included Aksum among the 4 greatest kingdoms, alongside Rome, Persia, and China. That is high geopolitical praise. After Islam emerged, Arab sources show a mix of respect and rivalry. Islamic tradition records that when early Muslims faced persecution in Mecca, the Prophet Muhammad sent some followers to seek refuge in Aksum. The king, called the Negus in Arabic sources, granted them protection. This event, the first Hijra, is foundational in Islamic history. Even if details vary, the story shows that early Muslims viewed Aksum as stable, powerful, and just. Later Arab writers praised Aksum's wealth, military strength, and cultural refinement. Distant Chinese records occasionally mention a strong kingdom in the Red Sea lands, suggesting awareness even at the far end of the Silk Road. All these accounts destroy any notion that ancient Africa was isolated or unimportant. Aksum was known, respected, and sometimes feared. So why did it fade from global memory? Part of the reason lies in Aksum's own gradual decline. But another part lies in how history was later written. As Europe emerged from the early medieval period, it crafted a narrative centered on Greece, Rome, and European Christendom. Africa was pushed to the margins. Christianity became a European story. Constantine, the Church Fathers, medieval kings. The fact that one of the earliest and strongest Christian empires was African was downplayed or ignored. It was not usually a deliberate conspiracy. It was a slow process of selection shaped by the priorities of later European scholars more interested in their own exceptionalism than in a truly global past. Yet the evidence never vanished. Coins, inscriptions, ruins, and foreign texts all point to the same fact. Aksum was central, not peripheral. The decline itself was slow and complex. No single catastrophe destroyed Aksum. Instead, multiple pressures accumulated over centuries. Trade routes shifted first. The rise of Islam in the 7th century changed the Middle East and North Africa forever. Arab merchants, supported by expanding caliphates, gradually took over networks Aksum once dominated. Relations were sometimes cooperative, but over generations, Arab control of Arabia cut Aksum off from its overseas territories. Adulis shrank. Without trade wealth, state revenues collapsed. Armies could no longer be maintained. Monumental construction stopped. Environmental stress added to the problem. The Ethiopian highlands are fertile but vulnerable. Long-term farming, deforestation, and soil erosion reduced productivity. Droughts grew more frequent or severe. Population may have declined or shifted away from old centers. Political unity frayed. Outlying regions slipped from central control. Local lords kept tribute for themselves. The strong, centralized state that had made Aksum a superpower fragmented into smaller units. External enemies pressed harder. Islamic states rose to the north and east. Beja nomads raided along the coast. Already weakened, Aksum struggled to defend its borders. By the 8th or 9th century, the old empire had effectively ended. The capital declined sharply or was largely abandoned. Successor rulers moved south into the deeper highlands, eventually giving rise to the medieval Ethiopian kingdom. Importantly, Aksum did not vanish completely. It transformed. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church, born in the Aksumite period, survived and thrived. The Christian identity Izana established remained the core of Ethiopian culture. Monasteries, liturgy, and traditions endured even as political power faded. In a real sense, Aksum lived on through monks and priests rather than kings and soldiers. The rock-hewn churches of Lalibela, built centuries later, consciously echoed Aksumite religious grandeur. Ethiopian rulers claimed descent from Solomon and Sheba, presenting themselves as heirs of Aksum. Ethiopia stayed Christian, surrounded by Muslim states yet never fully conquered, preserving an unbroken cultural and religious thread from the 4th century to today. Stand in modern Tigray, and you can still sense it, the weight of deep time, the presence of something ancient and enormous. The stele remain, weathered yet defiant. Palace and church ruins mark the earth. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church proudly traces its roots to Aksum. This is not dead archaeology. It is a living heritage. Ethiopian Christianity ranks among the world's oldest continuous traditions. It predates most European branches. Its liturgy, theology, and practices carry the mark of those early centuries when the faith was young and Aksum stood as a Christian power. The Ethiopian Bible includes books considered apocryphal in the West. Monks still guard ancient Ge'ez manuscripts. Religious art shows a distinctive African style rooted in Aksumite times. The belief in the Ark of the Covenant, whether historical or symbolic, remains central. Every Ethiopian church houses a sacred replica called a tablet, treated with profound reverence. Aksum's legacy reaches beyond religion. Ge'ez evolved into modern Amharic and Tigrinya scripts. The tradition of carving monumental architecture from rock and building for eternity flows directly from Aksumite masters. Most crucially, Aksum shatters the myth that Africa stood apart from ancient global history. It shows African kingdoms acting as world powers, minting coins, raising armies, constructing wonders, and negotiating with Rome and Persia as equals. African Christians helped form the early church. African merchants linked continents. Aksum directly challenges Eurocentric history that has long dominated textbooks. Yet most people still know almost nothing about it. Why? School curricula rarely mention it. Remote ruins and fragmented sources make the story hard to access. Above all, generations have been taught, explicitly or implicitly, that Africa was passive, primitive, disconnected before European arrival. Aksum proves the opposite. It was dynamic, sophisticated, globally connected. Modern archaeology continues to reveal more: new palaces, fresh inscriptions, clearer trade evidence. Scholars reread old texts with new questions. Piece by piece, Aksum's full story is being recovered. We began by asking why Aksum is unknown. The answer is clear. We have inherited a version of history that erases it. A version that centers Europe, marginalizes Africa, treats Christianity as a European gift, trade as a European discovery, and empire as a European invention. Aksum was Christian before most of Europe. It ran a trading empire while Europe lay fragmented. It built monuments rivaling Rome or Greece. Its legacy survives in Ethiopia's churches, in millions of believers, in stones that still stand as proof of African brilliance. This is living history. It connects directly to the present. It forces us to rethink the ancient world, and it deserves to be told widely. So the challenge is simple. Share this story. Talk about Aksum. Ask why schools skip it. Read more. Visit Ethiopia if possible. Support research that recovers these lost chapters. Every person who learns about Aksum nudges the narrative toward truth. Every realization that Africa was central, not peripheral, dismantles old lies. The Kingdom of Aksum was one of antiquity's greatest empires. It minted coins, raised monuments, fought wars, and helped shape Christianity. It stood alongside Rome, Persia, and China. It was wealthy, powerful, and unmistakably African. Remember Axum. Make sure others remember it too.